show you how to create a certain kind of grids in InDesign. There are various kinds, by the way, and we'll talk when we get back from Thanksgiving about tables. That is another grid. If you think of Excel documents with very rigid cells, that's kind of where tables start. But today I'm going to show you something much more freeform in a way. So I have a blank page and I want to insert a series of images. We have learned so far that I do Command D. Sorry, I need to activate InDesign. I was in a different software. I was probably in quick time. So I'm going to do Command D, and I'm going to choose a series of images. For example, all these, and then the one here, and then the elephant, and maybe these two. I don't even know what they are. But I choose a series of images, and there are about 8 images in here. And I'm going to say Open. I should turn off, by the way, those import options. Let me do that, actually, before I do that. Let me actually, sorry guys, let me do Command D, just import one here, go in options and uncheck import options. Sorry about that. I just don't want to have every time when I import a bunch of images to deal with having to specify the import options. Okay, let me start over. I selected 8 images. I'm going to say Open. So now my cursor, if you notice, is loaded not just with images, but with 8 of them. You see that blue number in parentheses that says 8? That indicates I have 8 images loaded up in there. Now I can insert them in a very chaos-like way by which I click and I click and I click and they all come in. But I don't want that. I want to create a grid. So I'm going to do Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. I'm still with my loaded images in my cursor. So I'm going to do right now, Command Shift, and you notice that my cursor loses that parenthesis 8 and that image and becomes a little grid-like thing, right? So now I'm going to start clicking and dragging. And as you can see, the default in InDesign is to have a 9x9 grid. What if I want a 2x4 since these are 8 images? So I'm still holding the Command Shift. If I use the arrow key holding the Command Shift, let me use the down arrow key. What's happening? I'm controlling with the down and up arrow keys the spacing in there. You see the horizontal spacing is changing, guys? Do you see that? Now if I use the left and right arrow keys, obviously I'm controlling the other spacing. I still have Shift Command held, okay, by the way. Now, I'm going to release Shift Command right now, but I'm not going to release the mouse, okay? Now I'm going to use the arrow keys. And notice what happens. Now the arrow keys control how many columns and how many rows I have. Doesn't this rock? Yes! There they are, my beautiful images. That's pretty cool, I think. It's fantastic. So let's do it together one more time, okay, guys? So I'm going to delete all, Command D, browse to the images I need, that maybe are going to be a lot more. This time there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe there are 10 this time. And so they're more than the 3x3 of InDesign, that default grid. I'm going to say Open. I see that I have 10 images loaded. Command Shift, click and drag. And I have the last grid I made. In this case, the 8 is not going to fly, right? So I'm going to release the Command Shift and use my arrow keys to add one more column. If you realize, oh, I forgot to control the gap between those images, you can still, if you still have your mouse down, you can still Command Shift and then use the arrow keys to control that gap. That is what I'm doing at the moment. Actually, let's say I don't want that gap. In next class, I'm going to talk about gap tool and a few other more sophisticated tools. Right now, I just want to give you the right amount of information that you can do the menu well without being overwhelmed by too many commands, too many things. Okay, what happens if I realize that I actually want something more interesting than this? What if I realize that I want that every other image has text? How do I do that? Or how do I grab one of these images and move it away? I can simply click on it and drag it. That's pretty sweet. That's kind of a little bit the superiority between this and creating tables. When create tables, you remember I told you how tables are like, think of an Excel document in which you have a bunch of cells, and those cells tend to be more of a rigid thing. You cannot just grab one and scoot it over a little bit. You know what I mean? It's a little bit trickier than that. But let's say that I actually want to go in here and I want to make this box, and this center box text boxes. So I might want to go in here and say go away, and go away. What if I realize these two are repeating thing, and so I want something different in there? I select that and I say Command D, and I go and I choose something else in there. Maybe I'll choose elephant and say open, right? So you can go and edit any images, but you can even go in here and say I want something different and kind of change it. Now another thing you can do, guys, you can select like this, and you can say, hey, look, I want to take this piece of my grid, and I'm going to go under Object, Content, and I want that to be something else. And actually the problem with that is I don't have it selected, sorry. It's just not allowing me to switch. Oh, I know why, because I need to remove the content. So if I remove that content, sorry, I take it back. If I remove that content with the content tool, I apologize. I was using the black arrow. I needed the white arrow, because when I use the black arrow, I remove also the frame. I actually want the frame. I want that frame to be a text frame, for example. So I want to just remove the content. So I'm going to go with the white arrow, click on that content, now becomes a brown bounding box, hit delete. Now I can go with my black arrow, select my box, and do what I was trying to do. That is go under content and say I want it to be text. And then you can obviously control click on there and say, hey, why don't you fill it with some, where is it? Some default text. Where is it? I never remember where it goes. Oh, here. Sometimes, notice this guy. Do you remember earlier when I did it, this fill placeholder text was down here? And now it was moved up here. Sometimes somehow it moves around. Don't ask me why, but it happens. So be aware of that. So you might have a bunch of text. And let's say in that text, though, you realize that you want to create some formatting. So I might go in here and say, okay, this is actually lasagna that I know is going to be a title. And this is actually going to be just the content. And I'm going to delete some stuff so I don't have that overset text. So maybe what I need here, I'm going to select the first line and Option arrow key to tweak the spacing between the first and the second line. We learned that in Illustrator, if you remember, and it works in InDesign as well. Also, let's say I want this one to be always the title. I know other boxes will have the name of the dish, that will be the title, and the ingredient that will be something else. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, hey, look, I actually want this to be Optima, and I want it to be an Optima bold. I want it to be size 14. I want it to be a beautiful deep red, like this, or like this. And I obviously, because Enrica always asks me to pay attention to that, and I kind of like that lady, I'm going to go in and say I want to set a leading and a tracking. So if I have 14 plus 3 is 17, you remember the rule, you want to at least have 3 points. I'm going to go with 18. And I'm going to go and specify the track. Now, I know that in this case it doesn't matter the leading, but I always tell you, because no matter what, I want you to always be aware that leading and tracking is a nice thing to add. Here, obviously, would matter the leading, and we will do that together. So once you have that formatting done, you guys see that the title looks the way you want to. You can go under Window, Styles, oops, and let's go with a paragraph style for the sake of it. If this, instead of being just one word, was like penne pasta with pollo and whatever, that would be a long line. Let's go with a paragraph option. Make sure this thing is highlighted, and then you go in here, actually, and obviously down here as well. But let's go up here so you see it a little bit better, and you say New Paragraph Style. And I'm going to call it Title. And if you notice, here there's a nice little summary that tells me it has assigned the default that is no paragraph style, but it also has assigned Optima, bold, size 14, leading 18, tracking 10, blah, 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 blah. And the reason why I included the leading is because, as I said, this is just one word. But what if this title became 2 lines? Because it was pasta with chicken and this and that. So it's kind of nice that you have a leading in there, because if it was 2 line, you would want to have that spacing set up, that vertical spacing set up. So I'm going to say simply OK, just keep it simple. And then I'm going to go in a different container. Let me go here and do the same thing. I'm going to go and select the content and delete it. And I'm going to select the box and say, hey, I want this to be a text. And I'm going to right mouse click on it, or control click, and say fill with placeholder text. Now up here though, when I'm going to go with the text tool, click in here and call it pasta with polo. Polo is chicken and blah 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 blah, right? Okay. So I have my paragraph style right there. I'm gonna actually close this. If you click on here right now, and you go and click on title, guess what? It turns to be exactly how my lasagna was, right there. You guys see that, right? It's kind of sweet that with one click now, every time I want that particular style. Now, you will be used to, when you use InDesign a lot, always set up style. So you're kind of never going to leave everything to the default, to be honest. I would go in here right now and say, I'm going to set a style for this too. In fact, if you ever go into making ebooks, the only way to make ebooks work properly is to have every piece of text with a style assigned. And that's a story for a different class. But be aware that it's really smart to actually control every piece of your text with styles. Even though styles, I have to say, tend to work for repeatable elements. So what if every piece of your text is unique? Then in that case, it doesn't work. But most of the time, you tend to kind of, especially in the restaurant menu, not have every piece to be different. Otherwise, it would become quite overwhelming and cluttered.